Oh, yeah.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Ted Alexandro Show. I am your host, Ted Alexandro, coming to you from an undisclosed location in the northeast of these somewhat United States of America. How are you, friends? What's been going on? Oh, I think you know. I think you know exactly what's been going on. A coup attempt in the Capitol. Say what? Oh man, it's nuts. Look, I'm not a political sort. I don't like to get into. I like to keep it light. I post my cat memes. I talk about cooking. Oh no, folks, I love it. This is insane. This is insanity. This is America. What could be better and more entertaining, right? There's a little bit of a lag before the inauguration. Hey, boom, you got yourself a white supremacist coup attempt on behalf of the outgoing 45. Folks, did anyone see this coming? Yes, probably. A lot of people did. Trump probably did. He tweeted about it, invited people to stop the steal. Stop the steal. Has the guy gotten anything in his life that wasn't stolen? Stolen wealth, stolen labor. Donald Trump cannot leave soon enough, but not before a ragtag group of white supremacists stage a poorly organized and poorly executed coup. Because let's face it, a coup was not really their goal. They were just doing the next dumb thing that they could get away with. And being white, that's always a lot. Can we get into the Capitol building? Yeah, sure. Only thing in our way is cops. What are they going to do? We're white. We're wearing Vikings outfits. And many of us have tattoos of Nazi symbols and white supremacy. They'll give us a wink and let us roll right in. Man. And the cops, let's face it, because they're essentially on the same side. The cops said, right this way, friends. Let's take some selfies. Let's give the illusion of a little bit of a struggle, but have at it. A little different from protests that we've seen in recent years, wouldn't you say? What would the difference be? Oh, I don't know. You can't help but think the cops are on the same side as these particular protesters. Coup attempters, right? They're all cops voted for Trump overwhelmingly. They're all Trumpers, uniform or not. So at a pro-Trump rally, a pro-Trump protest, a Trump won the election protest, cops are probably like, hey, we're going to have to put on a little bit of a show, but, we're with you. As opposed to a Black Lives Matter protest, which is what? A police reform protest. The institution that you work for is corrupt, corrosive, and murderous. They don't like those types of protests. So there's a little bit of a different dynamic at Black Lives Matter protests because they're trying to reform the very institution that these men, largely, and women, work for. So what the hell was going on you could oversimplify it and make it this cartoonish thing where a group of yahoos bumble their way into the Capitol building, put their feet up on Nancy Pelosi's desk, take selfies with cops, wear Viking uniforms and dead animals on their person. See, the thing is, protesters who actually have goals and things that they wish to see implemented, they don't have access to the halls of power, literally or figuratively. There's a firewall. They will be stopped well before they get real access to power or even to the building in this particular case. Whereas these guys who have no demand other than, white power and Trump, let's face it, they get in there, they put their feet up, and it's like, I guess this is everything we wanted. We're good. Shy of Trump getting in office, a few of us became social media celebrities for 15 minutes. So this is everything a Trump presidency promised. It promised absurdity, idiocy, lunacy. And it is all of those things. And on the surface, it is comical to look at some of these buffoons, but it is also starkly serious, because it does underscore the issues of white supremacy, of white privilege, of unaccountability, not only of the police, but of people who support the police and support Trump and support fascism, authoritarianism. They are above the law. Once again, we see that. So that is stark to see play out on such a world stage as it did yesterday. I mean, other countries have to be laughing at us. Here we are in a pandemic where our elected officials are still debating about whether we get $600 or $2,000 one time. Jeffrey Joseph, stand-up Canadian, was on the New Year's Eve show last week. He talked about how they've been getting $2,000 a month ongoing, rent and mortgages freezed, and they're getting child care checks as well if they have to take care of their own children. While Americans, and obviously they have universal health care in a pandemic. So here we are in the United States, where we're still waiting on one check. People have been out of work. People have been losing their jobs, losing their health care. And no end in sight. Biden has said that he doesn't support Medicare for all. So while there is, obviously yesterday was looking to be a day of celebration in the sense that both Reverend Warnock and is it Osinoff? I can't remember the second guy's name. The two Democrats ousted Loeffler and Perdue down in Georgia. And that was cause for celebration to get those two Republican seats out, turn the Senate blue, so that now the Senate is blue, the Oval Office is blue. So presumably something can be done. I will not be holding my breath, but you do have to take some joy in these small victories, if you want to call them that. Trump is out. I'm thrilled. Two more Republicans down south out. Great. as an activist, I'm like, who gives a shit? And, I'll believe it when I see it as far as that having any tangible results for the populace. But you have to take at least those small victories as cause for celebration. But that was undercut, of course, by the news cycle has been dominated by this coup. And, of course, one woman was shot and killed, I believe, as well. So, like, amidst all of this, someone was murdered by the state yesterday. Now, granted, she was trespassing and broke into the Capitol building. But wasn't it weird that it was, like, a woman? You got all these fucking Yahoo white boys parading around the Capitol building, taking selfies with cops, and somebody saw fit to murder a woman. So the theater and spectacle of it all, I mean, like Trump himself, it's gold for the news cycle. Les Moonves, I'll never stop quoting him. Bad for the United States. Trump, bad for the United States. Good for CBS. Trumpism, bad for the United States. Good for CBS. Good for media. They're making... How much money has Trump made all of these institutions? And that's why they haven't talked out about him, right? The media has not gone after him. Like in recent weeks since the election, everyone all of a sudden is a radical deplatforming Trump. But he made them millions and millions of dollars. Just like he made people that voted for him lots of money. I'm talking about the wealthy that got the tax break. The wealthy that got the tax break, he made them a lot of money. And some people, that's when they go into a voting booth, that's all. It's just, they might as well be looking at an investment portfolio. That's what they vote on. They don't care about Black Lives Matter, justice, democracy. It's my bank account. Yes, I vote for more money in my bank account. That's what a lot of these people do. They're not in it for America, society writ large. They're in it for their bank account. So if they voted for Trump, they got a nice return on that investment of voting for him. And you could argue that without the pandemic, he probably would have won. I don't know that people would have been that motivated to get out and vote for Joe Biden were it not for the pandemic. But thank God in that sense. Thank God the pandemic motivated people, because Trump obviously, as you would expect, bungled that from the start up until this day. So what's fascinating to me is that now everyone's protesting. You got the right protesting. You've got the left protesting. To me, that just symbols a government that is wholly, utterly unresponsive to the needs of the people. Do you think if people had all of the things I mentioned about what Canada has, do you think if we were receiving $2,000 checks every month, do you think there would have been a coup attempt yesterday? If we had universal health care, if there was a freeze on rent and mortgages, people wouldn't give a shit. They'd be like, maybe there would have been 12 people there. And that's what politics should be. It should just be who gives a shit who's in office. If we have health care, if we have affordable housing, if education is accessible to everyone, college is free, instead of people being just drowning in debt for going to school like we were told to do, buying a home, having a baby, all of these earmarks of the American dream sink you now. I'm for the Canadian dream now. I'm all about the Canadian dream. Universal health care and a government that sends you $2,000 a month in a pandemic and freezes your rent, freezes your mortgage, sends you money for childcare. Because the American dream is shit. The American dream is shit, and that's why people are storming. That's why people love Donald Trump, because he embodies a fuck you to the system in their minds. And let's face it, most of the people that were at that yesterday are insane, if not literally in some sense. A lot of them are mentally ill, Trump included. So, like, it's not to be, in my mind, it's not to be celebrated that, like, oh, look at the fucking yahoos. These are people that, they're largely in pain. I don't celebrate seeing people in pain, but they're also white supremacists in pain. So, it's complicated. When you try to be a loving person that comes from peace, it can be challenging when there's a coup attempt by white supremacists. So it is maddening to see the way that these white people, these Trump supporters, waltz into our nation's capital. But it says everything you need to know about America, right? They waltz right past the police. They put their feet up, and in a certain sense, like, yeah, people should have access. These people should not be behind barricades. They should not be behind the police. They should be answerable to us. But that's not what these people were doing. These people were just trying to stage a poorly organized coup on behalf of an ousted, voted out leader who they believe the election was stolen from. So, the sad thing is I don't know what is going to be delivered to Americans. What is going to be delivered to people? All of this spectacle aside, what is going to be delivered from a blue Senate, from a blue, Biden-Harris administration? All of the things that you told us we had to do. Georgia, get out there. You get out there and vote. We have to do this. The democracy depends on it. Vote Biden-Harris. We can't withstand another Trump administration, another 4 years. All right. Well, now what? The pandemic rages on. The most deaths, right, in December, I believe. The most deaths yet in the United States was last month. And people are struggling. Essentially, a depression is, if not coming, it's already here. People can't pay rent. People can't pay their mortgages. People have lost their jobs, haven't worked in a year, or are underemployed. And getting a one check for, what have we gotten? We got like $1,200 so far? It's insane. It's insane. So all we have is the theater of whatever the fuck is going on social media. So it was, it provides some value in that. And it provides value in that it lays bare institutional racism that has been with America from its inception. Right? That was like American history playing out, of a group of entitled white people marching past police with their blessing and getting into the halls of power. Now, the difference obviously being that this is not like the founders, and I'm not one of these people that loves to fucking talk about the founders and to romanticize that. But that's not what took place yesterday. That was a bunch of mentally ill people, and probably poor people, largely, with misguided notions of claiming the presidency for Donald Trump. So that's sad on too many levels to get into. So here we are, friends. Ain't that America? Just when you think it can't get any more bizarre, it always does. Friends, I ask you to please, if you would, hit the subscribe button, ring that notification bell so you know what we're up to. Like this video. It's right there. Jump into the comments. Tell us what you think. It helps the algorithm. The Ted Alexandro Show, if you're not aware, is on the list. It's being suppressed by the man. It doesn't, a lot of left-leaning podcasts will not be boosted by the algorithm. Politics in general, but certainly left-leaning. So anything that you can do, whether it's liking, subscribing, commenting, that feeds the algorithm and gets us around. So please continue to do that and share it with your friends. Let folks know what we're up to. We do appreciate it. And if you wish to support the show, if you're in a position to do so, please go to patreon.com/Ted Alexandro. Lots of great stuff there. The Ted Alexandro Comedy Academy. 8 classes so far. Lots of great feedback from people, too, which I do appreciate. One of the folks told me that he's watched it twice. So that warmed my heart. I'm glad you're getting something out of it. And as I say, classes will be ongoing. So check that out. Lots of bonus stand-up stuff there. And I will be posting not only stand-up, there's bonus episodes. Just recently posted an episode about the Bee Gees documentary. And there will be just bonus content, bonus videos, me talking more directly to patrons. And that will be coming up in the coming weeks as well. So if you're in position to do so, patreon.com/Ted Alexandro. All right, my friends, I am very excited to welcome tonight's guest. He is an American educator, scholar, activist, and actor. This man does everything. He's currently the Associate Director of Education at the Schoenberg Center for Research in Black Culture, where he was also a scholar in residence, earned a PhD in urban education, and has contributed chapters to several books on issues of racism, inequality, and Black education history, most recently to Black Lives Matter at School, an uprising for educational justice. He has collaborated with, among others, Howard Zinn, longtime member of the board of directors of Voices of a People's History of the United States, an organization founded by Anthony Arnaud and Howard Zinn to organize and promote public performances of primary texts from radical American history. In 2014, he ran for lieutenant governor of New York alongside Howie Hawkins on the Green Party of New York ticket. As I said, this is a man for all seasons, a man I am proud to call a friend. He's always doing fascinating work. Please welcome to the show, Brian Jones.
Hey, what's up?
How are you, my friend?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks so much for making the time to come on the show.
Yeah, I'm glad this finally worked out.
Yes.
It's been a while.
It has been a while, right? I mean, pandemic aside, it's been a while, generally speaking. So it was a nice, quiet week in the news. So I thought Brian is the guy to get. There's not much going on. You can certainly make something of nothing. No, quite the opposite is true. A lot is going on. And for that reason, I thought I would love to talk to you about what's going on. And Brian, what the hell is going on? Obviously the coup was, if that's the term you use, I don't want to put any words in your mouth because I want to hear your take on what the hell is going down, what went down at the Capitol, and how to contextualize all of this.
Well, I think, I don't know if, the thing I think about a coup, I guess I imagine coups to be better planned. So
for starters, yeah.
What's the end result, or what's the end game? I don't know. When I think of coup plotters, I think of better plans. But so maybe that's the right word, but they're not living up to its legacy.
Right.
But it's certainly a political attempt to intervene using force to back up basically the undemocratic aspirations, political aspirations of Donald Trump, who clearly has no interest in the job, but just wants the power. Um, one of the things that was really alarming to me was the way in which it was very clear. And I know this doesn't surprise anybody, but there is something to me about just seeing it. The really like racist and white supremacist symbols that were on display. And I know sometimes people are like, oh, you can't say these people are racist. Why are you always calling the Trump supporters white supremacists? Well, when they wear Nazi insignias, when they wave Confederate flags, when they have slogans about, 6 million is not enough on their shirt while they're storming the Capitol, I think we can pretty decisively say that this is a white supremacist movement.
And I think what's fascinating is those two things are side by side. The comedic ineptitude of Trump, generally speaking, and his entire history, and certainly his presidency, and his supporters as well. And this coup attempt, as you said, didn't seem particularly well thought out or planned. But the stark seriousness of, as you say, these white supremacist symbols and so much of what fuels Trumpism in general, wouldn't you say?
Yeah. I mean, I don't think, I think there's like his stage show. Like, for example, he says, we're going to march. And then he didn't march. He's not actually planning to like go into the building. He's going back to the White House. And, we know he's using this to raise money. And this is a kind of grab for his question of his ego and all of this kind of thing at stake. So there's a gap between what he says we're going to do and what he says it's all about, and what the actual plan is on the ground. So now he's led all of these people astray. I don't know. I guess to me, a part of what I'm finding frustrating in this moment is the way in which Trump, his supporters, their outrageousness, like you say, their comedic ridiculousness, the way in which that gives cover for a lot of politicians to look heroic, to look thoughtful and serious. I'm not one who, you had a joke I saw on social media that was like, is storming the Capitol such a bad idea? It's like, maybe it's who does it and why they're doing it. I'm not one to go in for all of this, like Capitol is hallowed ground. They're plotting a lot of bad stuff in that Capitol. They're plotting, to raise, they're always on both sides of the aisle, raising the military budget, planning to drop more bombs on people all over the world. While you have 300,000 people dying, they're plotting how not to give us universal health care. In the middle of a global pandemic, when they clearly have the resources to reach out and just help people, they're not doing it. And
and sorry to interrupt, but I also thought at this time when, this past year or 2 years where statues are coming down for all the right reasons, I also thought though the vessel and the group that's doing it is wrong, they were in some sense tearing down the statue of the Capitol and this edifice and the almost the untouchable nature that politics has become, the wall that surrounds the powerful, that we can't get to them. We can't touch them. We can't get representation. So there was all of these things were kind of at odds with one another. There was, I did delight in seeing people sitting in people's chairs and stuff like that, the buffoonery of it. But as you say, for the wrong reasons and misguided. But I'm sorry to interrupt that thought, but
it's okay. I'm glad you shared that thought. I just want to push back and say, I think you're giving them way too much credit. And that there is a history, a real history in this country of white supremacists barging into capitals. And by the way, I don't know what's going to go down in some of these state capitals, but it's possible. Like after the Civil War, when Black people got elected to the Congress and Black people got elected to office in a bunch of states, including southern states.
Wilmington, North Carolina, I think, notably, right?
Yeah, they barged in and overthrew the government. I mean, they just barged in. So the idea that, again, I also think there's a way in which a lot of the kind of sanctimoniousness of saying, well, we're this citadel for democracy. Wait, what? Like Black people couldn't vote very recently. Like we have a lot of undemocratic practice in this country. So I don't want to give any credit to these like white supremacists barging in.
Yeah, I'm just
The
talking about
Capitol,
the optics of it, but I do
yeah.
appreciate. You're absolutely right. I do appreciate you pushing back because we shouldn't give credit
Yeah.
to what they're doing and what their intent is.
Let me say another point, which is that I know a lot of people are hurting right now because everything we've seen in the last year with just like constant video feels like, and I guess I mean like a lot of Black people I think are hurting today and feeling like, obviously I can't speak for all people, but just some people I've talked to feel hurting because everything we've seen so recently, it's like a constant video barrage of Black folk getting brutalized for small things, for sometimes just being in a place. And then when we protest, we're told, well, maybe the police need like, de-escalation training or something like that. But doesn't look like they need any de-escalation training. Looks like they actually know how to handle even things that are getting out of hand, or where property is being damaged, things are being stolen. They know how to handle
crimes are being committed.
Yeah, crimes are being committed right in front of them. They know how to handle it. So there's and as somebody who has been to DC so many times to protest so many different things, I've always felt like, wow, I better stand right here because it sure does look, by the phalanxes of security, sure does look like if I stand right over there, something bad's going to happen to me. And obviously, there's lots of people who have the experience of trying to step over there and having a lot of bad things happen to them. But the way, I mean, I was, to be honest, shocked that they were able to get into the Capitol. And then as soon as I realized and saw the footage of, a police officer letting them in, it was like, wow, well, there it is.
Yeah. And don't you think that there are like multiple things obviously going on simultaneously? You have the micro, not to diminish it, because it is significant and it is emblematic of so much of American history, white supremacy. You have the theater of them storming in and the cops, as you say, allowing it. And I would suggest that that's because they're essentially on the same side. They're on Trump's side. They're on, white supremacy writ large's side. But then you also have people hurting, generally speaking, in a pandemic, and even before that, So now we have this bizarre thing where essentially no matter your political stripe, and obviously it's for different reasons, but everyone's protesting now in the United States, and it's because this system of governance is failing at every turn. So maybe if you could address both those things, the police kind of being on this on the side of these particular protesters, as opposed to, let's say, Black Lives Matter, where that is a direct affront to them because that is a protest criticizing them and the job that they do. So they go to that with a chip on their shoulder, and not just a chip, but probably lots of them with racism on their shoulder. So maybe let's start there before we get into the macro.
Derica Purnell has a great piece in The Guardian, I think today, about how the police, they're stepping back, that their job is to protect and to preserve and keep a lid on inequality. And that's why they always kind of tilt in a certain direction. And in addition to the reasons that you state, I mean, we know that white supremacists get hired in police precincts all over the nation. And so it forms a kind of institutional basis and foundation for that kind of organizing. So that affinity is there. And we see it with Kyle Rittenhouse, who kills people and gets like a bottle of water and a thanks.
That's the kid in Kenosha.
So we see that affinity on the kind of micro level. But then on the macro level, I mean, part of Derecka Purnell's argument is that that one of the outcomes of this could be that then the mayor of DC and other officials kind of call for more police, and therefore more policing, and that it takes us away from the agenda of trying to think about how do we want to live in a society with less police, with no police. How do we think about abolition and that kind of a movement and the things that movement is thinking about. I want to say another thing that I think is interesting to me, that's something that I've been thinking about, is it's related to where white people stand in all of this, because obviously people stand in different places, and you can't paint any people with one political brush. But it struck me over the summer, the diversity of the Black Lives Matter protests, that the unifying slogan of the youth radicalization in the United States of America wasn't Medicare for all over the summer. It was Black Lives Matter. Like, that's interesting to me. And I think there's a power to the history, to Black history in this country. There's a specialness and a particularness in a way in which it punctures and pokes and nags at the conscience of this nation. And that when that question gets raised, it's suddenly like, whoa, it's felt.
Yes.
And so there's a lot of people, and this heartens me, who decided I'm with them. This summer, like, I'm with them. They're marching, I'm with them.
And that's ongoing too. That's not just this summer. That's still going on in Portland and DC and yeah.
And I say that to say I'm not interested in winning over the people storming the Capitol. I don't think I'm an educator. I don't like the idea of writing people off, but as an activist, I don't want to try to create a dialogue with them. I think there's always going to be a hard right wing that's going to stick to their positions, and that it's going to be very hard to move. But I think there's a lot of other people who are feeling disgust with Trump and Trumpism, and disgust at what they just saw, who I think are moving in a different direction. And I hope that what we land on as a kind of like, what should we think about this, isn't some of the things that are on offer right now.
I think that's a great point, because American history looms so large every day. So when history bubbles up in the present in the form of George Floyd, or on and on and on, Breonna Taylor, I think the younger generation is quicker to see past all the obfuscation or the changing of the narratives, and to realize that this is something that we have to grapple with and we have to embrace. I know there's some kind of debate about the nature of the ways in which Germany has embraced their past with Nazis and everything. But that's one template that seems to, on its face, be a good indication of how a nation can acknowledge its past and move forward.
Well, here's a good starting point. Don't have Nazi statues. They got that part right. There aren't Nazi statues and things named after Nazis. We are still working on that one because we have Confederate monuments and things, the army bases on places named after Confederate generals. There's a way in which we have this history of feeling like, well, we can't condemn those people. Like, we have a way in which of kind of appeasing this hard right, white supremacist, organized factions of society, and feeling like, well, we have to we can't go after them. We can't condemn them. Like, that has to be kind of somehow appeased in our history. And that's, I think, part of why it festers. But I want to say another thing, which I had the opportunity to talk with some high school students this morning, and they were raising the question of whether or not racism could ever end in this society. Like, can this thing be fixed? And I think one thing that I started thinking about is the way in which sometimes what we think of as racism are these like Trumpistas storming the Capitol. And yeah, they're racist, no question. But there's another way that racism works in our society that doesn't look nearly as buffoonish or cartoonish, as you say. And that is that the people who control loans and the banks and the people who control jobs and all kinds of opportunities. I mean, the subprime mortgage meltdown revealed the way in which people make money off of racism. So I think that's a big problem. That racism has this kind of deeper way of working, is institutional ways of working that we don't necessarily address.
Yeah, that's true. And people do. Oh, I'm sorry. Can you hear me? Oh, there you
Sorry.
are.
Yeah, sorry, I muted myself.
Oh, that's okay. There was no need to do that, by the way. You were everything you were saying was was right on the money. It is fascinating to me that it is those those stark kind of really life and death things that are caught on video or have that narrative that tend to capture the imagination and put racism front and center in ways that, like can't be even argued with. But as you say, all of the many ways in which opportunity and I think defund the police was like a great example of like, where is money flowing in our society? What are our priorities? And as you say, you can extrapolate that out to the military as well. But the conversation around abolish the police, defund the police, is such an interesting one because it's really talking about representation in terms of resources and dollars and reallocating money that is in these bloated police departments around the nation and allotting that into neighborhoods that are starved of resources intentionally.
Yeah, I mean, imagining once you say like, well, wait a minute, abolish the police, it's like it boggles the mind because you'd have to try to imagine a community with no police. Like, what would be required to not have to have an armed police force driving around or walking around or any, like, not exist? What would have to be in place for that to happen? And I mean, I don't know. For me, the first things I think about are, well, okay, to start with, everybody would have to have like their basic needs met. Like, you wouldn't have to like steal for food or like basic resources. So you don't have to like have crimes of desperation. But then there are more complicated questions like, well, okay, what about kind of like interpersonal violence and harm that really happens between people, sexist violence or, violence within families? Like, how do you deal with that? And it just raises, I mean, I think it's clear that the solutions we have right now, the carceral solutions, police, prisons, et cetera, don't actually solve the problems of harm. They compound them. Mm-hmm. In addition to the fact that the historical roots of those institutions are so solidly in slavery and racism, and that legacy still persists and is an important part of the way that they work today. All of those, I think, are good reasons to at least adopt an abolitionist perspective and start thinking through, how do we get to some other place that isn't living like this?
And it's fascinating if you think about even the way things were handled yesterday. I think if that were the way protest was handled across the board,
oh yeah,
right, then there wouldn't be, defund the police wouldn't even be talked about in the same ways, right? If Black Lives Matter or any protest, but obviously specifically Black Lives Matter, were to be handled in that same way, it would not be the same conversation about the police.
You know what's interesting? I keep thinking about, there's this book by Edmund Morgan called American Slavery, American Freedom. And there's a picture that was circulating yesterday with a guy. He's in like one of the politicians' offices with his boots up on the desk. And it brought me back to a passage in this book. It's about colonial Virginia. It's the first kind of cell of the organism that became the United States. And it gave us first several US presidents came from Virginia. And it's this really incredible history where they describe these huge plantation owners, wealthy people, and they have a problem. The problem is that there's all these young people who followed them, or some cases they've brought from England, who have weapons. They don't have a lot of land. They don't have a lot of money, but they have a feeling of entitlement that they should have those things. And they don't, they're angry at those big plantation owners. And because they're so well armed, they show up. They'll show up at a plantation owner's house and put their boots up on the table and expect things.
Yeah,
I mean, he literally describes that as a thing that happened. And it got so combustible, and there were so many rebellions. And sometimes those rebellions kind of lined up with the rebellions of enslaved Africans, that they finally figured out that they have to redirect the anger of those well-armed young, they don't call them white men, but that's, what we call them today. Those people had to direct their anger someplace else. And it couldn't be at the big plantation owners. And so it seems to me, so then they develop this kind of populism where some people who are the wealthy types get practiced at the art of whipping up this mob and pointing their anger this way or pointing their anger that way and kind of playing the mob. And I think that's what we've been seeing. Trying to whip up and play this mob. Kelly Loeffler's trying to, put on a flannel shirt and play that mob. Then as soon as that mob isn't separating kids from their parents at the border or isn't attacking Black Lives Matter protesters, as soon as that mob gets directed at them, as soon as that mob marched on the Capitol, now they're upset with the mob. Now they want to disassociate themselves from Trumpism. I mean, I think what we've seen here is like now the mob came for them. That's why they're resigning. That's why they're trying to save face. That's why suddenly they're willing to disavow the mob. But they were cool with the mob, all along.
Sure. Now, what do you see in these final weeks leading up to the inauguration? Do you think this was kind of a one-off, something that bubbled up that will dissipate? Or do you think this kind of maybe pops up again up until the inauguration or beyond? Or do you think once Biden and Harris are sworn in, things kind of tamp down a bit?
No, I think this is a huge problem. And I'm concerned that the tone or the idea is, again, conciliatory. The idea is like, well, how do we heal the nation? How do we bring the nation back together? It's the same dynamic as the Civil War. It's like when the nation was divided and the white folks were at odds with each other, that was when we could get Black freedom and Black rights, and like we could move towards democracy. And then as soon as they bound up the wounds, that's when we got Jim Crow. So I'm concerned that the whole idea will now be that Mitch McConnell and the Republicans are disempowered. The Democrats are all out of excuses for not delivering for regular folk. And if they have to come up with some excuse for not delivering, it will be in a way that they try to revive and conciliate and appease and preach a kind of national reconciliation with this rabid right wing that was hell-bent on power 5 seconds ago.
Yeah, and it's interesting because Biden largely ran on like healing the soul of the nation, all this type of rhetoric. But I think, when these things happen, it's always an opportunity to demonstrate that you, in fact, are a democracy, that you do, in fact, have laws that will be enforced, whether you're talking about cops that murder people or what happened yesterday. If, in fact, those people were rounded up, arrested, dragged out, taken, not to celebrate, again, the carceral state or whatever, but we are a land of laws. And if they are just if there are consequences, right? And that's the whole thing about Black Lives Matter and reform and talking about policing. There and it's inextricably linked with white privilege and whiteness, not having consequences in these types of situations. So I guess what I'm asking is, do you think had to me, sometimes it just seems like the answers are so simple. Like if and it's not like the questions are not being asked. It's not like people haven't had town halls on and on and on, and all of these things haven't been discussed, whether you're talking about police reform or community policing or whatever the situation is. So like it is maddening that it's talked about in the sense that there isn't the political will for it. But it's just, and I think maybe it speaks to exactly what you're talking about Black folks feeling, sad or dispirited or despondent. It's got to be just a repeating kind of blow where it's so obvious what needs to be done, and it's not difficult either.
I think it's totally understandable. It's obvious that there's people who were like, open the door, here's your exit, please go this way. Now that you've raided the Capitol, this is your exit, ma'am, please go, in this direction. People taking photos with police officers. I mean, they're the kind of kid gloves treatment, the inequality of treatment under the law is obvious.
Absurd, yeah.
It's obvious. And I think there's a wide range of opinions about what should be done. And like you say, there's an abolitionist position that wouldn't want to call for, carceral solutions, but would point up the hypocrisy and the inequality in treatment that you're describing. But there are a lot of folks who I think would cheer if the law were applied. I mean, there are a lot of people who feel like, well, yeah, you should go to jail. I think that's an understandable feeling and an understandable impulse. But as in so many other things, I think we always have to be thoughtful and try to figure out how does sometimes these things boomerang back on us. And there comes to be a way in which they will use this incident to strengthen things that will later then get used against people who are protesting for peace or for democracy, et cetera. And so, that's why I'm just cautious about saying like, yeah, lock them up. Even though, I have no sympathy with those people in their legal defense.
Sure. Yeah. Abolition can wait until after we get these folks handled. Now, let me ask you, as activist, if you put on that hat, what is your perspective as we go into a Biden-Harris presidency? Obviously, in a certain sense, this almost plays into putting them in a more positive light, because their whole campaign essentially was, we're not Trump, we're getting rid of Trump. So on a day when, as you said, Loeffler lost, and I'm blanking on the Purdue lost. Yeah. So what was looking to be a day of a celebration of the Senate going blue, blue in the White House, so this could potentially position things for some of the things you were talking about, maybe a discussion of Medicare for all, these types of things. But all of the things that happened yesterday really kind of took the wind out of the sails of the celebration.
Yeah.
But let me ask you this: is it even is celebration too strong a word? How do you look at this transition now and where things sit? Because obviously Obama was kind of somewhat situated in a similar position.
Absolutely.
So how do you feel going into a Biden-Harris presidency?
Well, like I say, I think their approach seems similar to Obama's, and that means, and similarly, there's a moment of revulsion and disgust. I mean, don't forget what George Bush did, and the reasons that he was so reviled. I mean, now he's hugging Michelle Obama and talking about coming to the inauguration, and he seems magnanimous.
Yes.
But don't forget all the lives that were lost and all the bombs that were dropped and all the lies that were told and all of the, blood and treasure that was squandered. And for what?
So well said. So well said. Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt, but yeah,
No, I just think we're in danger of going down that road again in the name of healing, instead of seeing this as an opportunity to do something bold and do big, new, bold, transformative things. I don't think we'll get that kind of boldness of vision unless we, ordinary people, press for it and organize for it and speak out for it and, yes, protest for it. I think that's what is badly needed, and I don't expect it as like just of course from the Democratic Party. We've seen them stand in direct opposition to Medicare for All. We've seen them vote for expanding the military budget. So I think I'd certainly join other people in celebrating the downfall of this really hard right wing that has been in power. I celebrate the downfall of Donald Trump and Mitch McConnell as majority leader and all of that. Bye-bye. But that doesn't mean that we're delivered, because we still have a government that is unmotivated to do the kind of sweeping, transformative things that we've needed for a long time.
Yeah, yeah. So what would your kind of vision look like of not pie in the sky, but what are the hopeful things that you see potentially being delivered? Maybe if all of the things coalesce, the pressure from activism and the blues in office, what do you see as potentially happening?
That's a really good question. It seems to me that now would be the time to revisit Medicare for All. The idea, I think our physical bodies are so interconnected. We are now learning in this kind of lethal way. Like we breathe upon each other just in like going about our daily lives. We are exchanging material. Our lives, our physical lives are interconnected with so many people. So to have a health system that is very picky and choosy about which people are going to be allowed to get care is just a recipe for disaster, let alone the kind of profit-driven nature, all of that kind of question, insurance as a matter of health. So the interconnectedness of us that the pandemic, I think, forces us to recognize, to me, is, when else are we going to have the kind of stars align to just like take care of everybody healthcare wise? That would require enormous political courage to restructure American healthcare. I think that would obviously be, top of mind and should be at the top of the agenda. Another thing I think is our environmental calamity. The planet and the West Coast is literally burning. And I know the Democrats talk a better game about this, but we have Democratic leadership that, Obama supported the pipelines. Obama built more pipelines for oil and gas. So we have a problem that goes deeper than blue and red. And so to save this planet, we're going to have transformative action on the question of energy and how we live. I don't see right now the political will to have that kind of a transformation, the kind that we need. So those are two issues right off the bat. And then another obvious one, to my mind, what we've been talking about is the question of the police. A great starting point would be to get the police out of schools. You have virtual schools right now. Why do you even need them on the budget? Like, now's the time. Take them off the budget. Take them off the budget. Now's the time. That is an obvious place where it would be easy.
They're not policing the Zoom classes, are they?
Well, and then sadly, we joke, but then there are kids who are like, there are people, I don't even want to get into it, but there are people who are young people who are facing kind of carceral consequences for, failure to do your homework, things like that. I mean, it's
Right.
the way in which people are trying to redo harsh disciplinary consequences over Zoom is ridiculous. So, but I do think there's an opportunity right now to change the way some things are done, in the context of the pandemic and the new administration.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, Brian, I appreciate you. I appreciate your perspective, and I don't think it's any accident that behind you are loads of books, and behind me is nothing. There's some symbolism there. But I just really do appreciate all that you do, whether it's role as teacher, working at the Schoenberg Center, running for office, all of the ways that you model participation in democracy and just in the world. So thank you for that. And thank you for making time to be on the show.
Thanks for the invitation. It's been a long time since I've seen you, and I'm really happy that I was able to join you. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, my friend. And I hope to see you in person sometime soon.
Let's do.
Okay. Be well. Thanks, Brian.
Take care.
You too. Brian Jones, everyone. That is a man whose perspective I value greatly. As I say, those books are not for show. Follow him on Instagram, because Brian is someone that even on Instagram he has Brian Jones Educator is his Instagram handle, and he is constantly posting about books that he's currently reading or has read, and it's intimidating, but it's also edifying. So yeah, that's a guy who is, as I said, doing all the right things and doing all that he can to make the world a better place. And I so appreciate him making this show a better place tonight. Thank you, Brian. Well, friends, as I said, please do follow at Brian Jones Educator on Twitter. On Instagram. And let's now take a couple of your questions to close out the show. The first question is regarding the Mets. And this comes on Twitter. Hey, Ted, what do you think about the Mets trade? Does this mean we win the World Series? I heard the Mets. I'm a huge Mets fan, going back to the Mookie Wilson days, the Joel Youngblood days, the John Stearns days, the Bruce Beauclair days, Craig Swan. The Mets, as a Queens kid, as a New Yorker, you loved the inept, bumbling, perennial losers, the Mets. Then, of course, they got good in my high school years. They won the World Series in '86 with Dwight Gooden, Darryl Strawberry, Keith Hernandez, Gary Carter, that crew. Insane though they may have been as a group, it was fun to root for a team that was dominant. That's the only time in my life, I think, that I've had that feeling. I always envied the other, like Chicago Bulls fans during the Jordan era, Celtics fans in the Bird, Parrish, McHale era, Lakers fans, obviously. I always envied cities that had that. And as a Mets fan, obviously the Yankees were always good, but that wasn't my team. I was rooting against them largely. But the Mets have made a big trade. But to let you know where I'm at in my life, I don't know who this guy is. Francisco Lindor. They got him from the Cleveland Indians. Francisco Lindor and Carlos Carrasco. I think I've heard both of those names. See, I used to be in fantasy baseball. I used to scour the box scores. I knew everything. I could tell you this guy's hometown. I could tell you how many RBIs he had last night, if they played. But I'm the father of a 1-year-old now. I don't know what the hell's going on. In a certain sense, it's liberating. I have no idea. I know the Mets changed ownership. That was welcome. I was happy to see the Wilpons go. This guy, Steve Cohen. And apparently this guy is causing a ruckus, making deals, signing people. So now, from what I understand, and this is someone who's not a sports fan anymore and knows next to nothing, I understand the Mets are the front runners in the National League East, if not the whole of the National League. We know they have great pitching. We know about Jacob deGrom, Noah Syndergaard. So it looks like the Mets might be positioned. So to answer your question, yes. I forgot who asked that. My apologies. But yes, I think you're right. I think the Mets are going to win. Why don't we say it? The Mets are going to win the World Series. And if you pay a certain amount, you can have a cardboard cutout of your face at the game. And won't that be fun? So even though I am disconnected from sports and from the world, and certainly the Mets, I'm excited because like even my friends are talking about it. And I'm like, guys, what is this? What does this mean? Is this good? Is this like when they got Piazza good? Or is it when they got Gary Carter good? Like, how excited should I be? And they're like, yes, all of those things. You should be that excited. So that's how excited I'm going to be. So yes, the Mets are going to win the World Series is the answer. We've got a question from Brian Kahl. Are Hot Cross Buns and Three Blind Mice the same song? Yes, Brian. You are referencing my my iconic, legendary bit, my Hot Cross Buns bit. They are. They at least the beginnings of the song. They do deviate, as often happens, at a certain point. But the crux of the song, if the writer of Three Blind Mice were to take the writer of Hot Cross Buns to court, that would be a hot suit, because it's the same melody. Come on, who are we kidding? But as a teacher, I loved it. I taught like 5 songs with one melody. I have another question that simply asks, WTF, what the fuck? Giannis, this is on Instagram. Giannis is not Giannis. That's actually, Giannis, that is the perfect question every day. What the fuck? Especially now. You know, you should be asking that, and you are right to ask that. And I don't really have the answer other than to say, right? Yeah, you're right. What the fuck? I don't know. I don't know what the hell's going on. Nate asks, what age should I expect gray pubes? I'm 51. I'm going to say around 49. You're going to get a little salt shaken in, not stirred. And it's not overwhelming. It's just a few, a few ne'er-do-wells infiltrating. And I think that is all we have in the way of questions. So thank you for submitting. Yes, that will do it. That will do it, folks. Please keep your questions coming, and even text us. The old text line is still open. Matthew, if you would put that down, 909-575-0737. Is that it? I don't even know if I'm remembering that properly. But always happy to get your questions, always happy to answer your questions as best I can. Well, friends, that is our show. Hopefully you are safe, you are well, you are not participating in any coups. It's inadvisable at this point. Do what you want to do what you have to do. But I think one coup for 2021 is plenty. So let's leave that where it is. Once again, we thank Brian Jones for coming on and sharing his wisdom and perspective. And we thank you for your questions. And we thank our producer extraordinaire, the man with the plan. He's the man on the ones and twos. He is Matthew L. Weiss.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Matthew. Thank you for our maestro, Pro DLC. You can find his music streaming everywhere that you listen to music. And of course, we thank our executive producer extraordinaire, Madeline Geraldine. I love you very much. And I love that little guy, if you would just let him know. Tell him I say hi. Friends, as always, please hit that subscribe button. Tarry not. Ring the notification bell. Jump into the comments. Like this video. Do it now. And if you wish to support the show, if you have the means, please go to patreon.com/Ted Alexandro. Until next time, friends, thank you for watching. I'm trying to think of a nice cool line. And stay cool.